Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Football at 4 powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Andrew DiCecco's in the house today. Before we get to him, hey, congratulations, Robert in Galloway. You are our latest qualifier. Robert, we'll see you at the Eagles draft party at Maynard's in Margate on Thursday, April 27th, 2 weeks from today. Andrew DiCecco, I'm sure you're ready for the draft. Let's talk a little draft with him as we get ready for April 27th, round 1, pick 10 and pick 30 with Andrew DiCecco here. Some prospects he likes. You know, Andrew, we've talked a lot about this draft. We asked our listeners today, and I know it's a tough answer, but 2 weeks from the draft today, your favorite player that could be at pick number 10 would be who?
Jalen Carter.
And the possibilities that he gets to 10 in your mind is what?
Well, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40%. I mean, some of this stuff is smokescreen, to be honest with you, but I do think I envision a scenario in which that happens, although it may not be very likely. I also envision a scenario where he's, like I said, within striking distance, where the Eagles maybe are a little bit more aggressive and they see him at 7 or 8 and they decide to trade up and grab him, knowing how important the interior defensive line is to the franchise and their overall philosophy.
Yeah, and somebody asked me the other day, all right, Arizona, they've had 6 teams, I guess, that were rumored to call them at number 3. If Philadelphia was one of those teams, would it be because they value Jalen Carter, or is Will Anderson a guy you'd rather have and move up to 3?
I wouldn't rule Will Anderson out either. I mean, you really like what he can provide off the edge. Now, I do think he could stand to add a little bit more strength and weight to his frame. But I mean, you're talking about somebody with 40 career starts, can anchor, can really get after the passer, and that's what the Eagles really prioritize, right? The defensive line, the offensive line, and I think that he has day one starter written all over him. So it wouldn't surprise me if that was one of the players that they were targeting. If they were, in theory, one of those teams, I think he's a top 5 player. I think we'll go within the top 5. So Will Anderson would be a player, but also Jalen Carter, really, to me, knowing that there's a big void there at defensive tackle in particular, and knowing that from many accounts, not just mine, he's the best player in the draft. So I think that it would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
If they move up to there, I would think that it would be for him.
Yeah, Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4. At that defensive end or edge rusher position, how many guys are in play for you? How many guys, if they took at number 10, would you feel comfortable with? I know for the listeners out there, Andrew does a lot of study in the draft, Shrine Bowls, Senior Bowls. You've watched a lot of these prospects and studied them. At number 10, how many of those edge rushing type of players would you, or defensive linemen, I guess we could throw into the mix, would you feel comfortable with?
Well, this is assuming that there's that a couple of these guys fall, but let's just assume that Will Anderson doesn't slip, Tyree Wilson doesn't slip. Okay, so you're looking at number 10. I would say maybe Nolan Smith, because you really like his intriguing intangibles. I think his ability to close and get after the quarterback is really enticing when you look at what the Eagles already have from a defensive line standpoint. Lucas Van Ness, to me, strikes me as somebody that's going to go a little bit higher than what he's being projected in a lot of the mock drafts out there, just because you like his size. He reminds me of a bull in a china shop. He's just a big, explosive, twitchy player. Obviously, he didn't start during his Iowa career. We outlined that last week, but I think that he can be a plug-and-play guy, and you like his size and his ability to be an impact guy. Maybe early on, I don't know if he would be a starter, but I think his intangibles are intriguing. But as far as being there at number 10, I would say Nolan Smith. Outside of that, you might want to be able to trade down a little bit. Maybe look at a Miles Murphy from Clemson or somebody along those lines.
Yeah, some of those guys, Nolan Smith, I brought him up earlier today. The more I'm watching him, the more he intrigues me. Obviously, explosive, 4.3 40, just has basically eye-popping numbers, and you wonder how productive he could be at the NFL level, because I guess I would say to you, he wasn't the most productive college player, so how does that translate to the NFL?
Well, I think knowing that the Eagles have such a formidable stable of pass rushers, the pressure wouldn't be on Nolan right away to come out like gangbusters and all of a sudden be expected to be this guy that's going to rack up 12-plus sacks as a rookie. I think that he could kind of have the luxury of playing behind a Brandon or playing along the lines of with a Brandon Graham and a Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat, and you can sort of blend in, develop, add to your strength with Tracy Rocker, the defensive line coach, and really just develop as a pro. I don't know that he's where he needs to be right now from a functional strength standpoint to be an every down player in this league, but you look at his traits, and that's what when you look at number 10, you're drafting traits, and you're looking at projection. I think he has all pro ability, and he's an explosive athlete, which you mentioned, 4.3, 4.40. That's unheard of for a defensive lineman. And I think that when you look at what he can bring to the table, he can provide splash plays on defense. And when you're looking at 10, you want those blue chip type of traits, and I think he provides that.
I was going to say, how does he pair up with a guy on the other side like Hassan Reddick? I mean, is that a pairing that is intriguing, or is he kind of a similar type of player?
Kind of similar. I mean, you're going to give up obviously some size, so you wonder how he's going to be able to defend the run consistently. Maybe he might wear down if he had to play an excessive number of snaps, especially early on, which is why I think that it's so. If they take him, it would put Nolan in in an advantageous situation where he's not going to be expected to take on 45 snaps a game or what have you, and really, I think that can stunt your growth as a young player if you're not put in the proper position to be successful. And that goes for any draft prospect. But I think that it may be a little bit redundant, but you have to look in the future. The Eagles like players like that. Josh Sweatson, a very athletic player, obviously has different dimensions than the two players we've mentioned, but he's a lengthy, athletic, really good bend. And I think Nolan Smith has certain traits that really accentuate what the Eagles look to do on defense, and really exciting player, I think, if you're able to get him in there. Sort of like getting a Ferrari out there off the edge that can really, really get after the quarterback.
Yeah, he's a guy that I'm starting to like more and more. I mean, my one problem would be, hey, is he going to be one of those guys that has all the traits, the speed, the explosiveness, and, is he one of those guys that just kind of doesn't make it at this level because he's all speed and doesn't have the skill? But he's definitely a guy that I think the listeners should take a look at a little bit more, Nolan Smith. And then, I want to get your take on so much Peter Skronsky talk. I feel like the Eagles fans should get to know this guy because the assumption is that Cam Jurgens will be the right guard next year. Is a pick of Skronsky telling you that they don't think Jurgens can handle that position?
Maybe not necessarily. I think it's having a contingency plan in place. I think it's also, making the move with an eye towards the future, right? No more Jason Kelsey. You ideally would slide Cam Jurgens over to center and then have Skronsky playing guard, and he would complement Landon Dickerson at left guard. And all of a sudden you have a young interior to go along with Jordan Mailata on the blind side. And then maybe you start to invest in a right tackle to be Lane Johnson's heir apparent. But, I mean, that would be a move. The Eagles are always very progressive thinking, and I think if you take Pete Skronsky, that's not necessarily a slight on Cam Jurgens, but it's more so stockpiling the offensive line, which is a position in which they obviously prioritize, and it's been it's been a lot of what's allowed the Eagles to have such sustained success. So I think that it would make a lot of sense, and it wouldn't surprise me. Although 10, I think, would be a little high for Pete. I think you could afford to trade back, possibly a couple spots, maybe pick up some assets later on that could help you. But, yeah, I mean, that wouldn't be a head-scratcher to me. I'm a big Pete Skronsky fan.
All right, so you'd be okay with him at number 10. I think the one thing is, like, the Eagles, obviously, if I was to say, Andrew DiCecco, what's the strength of this team? The offensive line is the answer, right?
Right, and it effectively keeps the Eagles in every game, knowing that you have an offensive line that's probably the league's best, that can stand tall against any defensive line and allow your quarterback to stand back there and deliver the football to the plethora of playmakers that they have. I mean, it also makes you feel a little bit more comfortable about the running game situation. Maybe you don't have to have an all-world running back there or a Bijan Robinson back there because you have an offensive line that can really pave the way for, players that you could find later in the draft, and you can make them look like, second round talents.
With Darius Slay and James Bradbury signed, are there's three corners that everybody seems to like, regardless of what how you have them ranked. Are those guys on your board at number 10 based on who you have here currently?
As we've gone on through the draft process, I don't necessarily have Devin Witherspoon there at 10. Christian Gonzalez, to me, I think is a more polished and a more technically refined player. I like his size a lot more. Devin Witherspoon is somebody who plays with elite aggressiveness and competitiveness, but he's only 180 pounds. So you wonder if his play style is going to be able to translate to the pro level immediately, or if he's going to have to adapt. He also played a lot more slot than you originally realize when you really break things down. So I think when you look at Christian Gonzalez, he would be a plug and play guy. Obviously not this year, but the year after perhaps, or even the year after that. 6'1", 197. Like I said, technically refined player. There's not a lot of blemishes to his game. I think you can feel really comfortable if you're the Eagles, and if you're the fan base, if the Eagles take him. He's a pro, and he is pro ready. Would start on most teams if he doesn't get drafted to Philadelphia. He would start from most teams.
Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash from InsideTheBirds.com. Over at InsideTheBirds.com, I liked your piece about the Eagles free agents. So let's get your thoughts on, of the new guys they brought in here, which is the most intriguing to you?
Well, the most intriguing, I would say, is Rashad Penny, but he also has the most question marks, right? So, and I think the guaranteed money is the ultimate indicator of, well, it's been the ultimate indicator of what the Eagles maybe anticipate from this crop of free agents, right? There's low risk, high reward. They all have different degrees of question marks, but Rashad Penny is a bigger bodied running back that has some burst and wiggle to his game. He can hit the home run. So I don't know that he should be labeled as primarily a power running back. I think there's different elements to his game that makes it an even more intriguing signing. Now, he missed a substantial amount of games throughout his career. That's been well documented. So he's a player that I think could go on both ends of the spectrum. He could push to break the 1,000-yard rushing barrier this year, or he could be somebody that doesn't even make the team if he's nursing injuries through training camp. And I don't know that he's going to be a player the Eagles are going to want to keep around if he's banged up through the summer, and you don't know if you're going to be able to rely on him, if that's going to be something that resurfaces throughout the season. That may be somebody that you kind of want to cut ties with. But they're going to give him a long look this summer, and I think ideally he would be an early down running back for them. Like I said, guaranteed $600,000. I mean, that's a great value signing. Early down player, complement, working contingents with Kenny Gainwell, sprinkle in some Boston Scott, maybe even some Trey Sermon. But I still do think, Mike, that they're going to draft their running back, as intriguing as that signing may be.
Real quick on the running back, are you a Gibbs fan?
Big Jahmyr Gibbs fan. I mean, and if you imagine him on this offense, I mean, I like Gibbs more than I like Robinson, just because of he reminds me a lot of Alvin Kamara, just based on body type. But he's an explosive, twitchy player that can hit the home run at any given time. And when you imagine him on this Eagles offense with what they already have in place, I mean, that's just an electric offense and an embarrassment of riches.
So you are one of the few, the Gibbs, I guess you should say. You like Gibbs more than you like Robinson as a fit or as a player?
As a player and as a fit. I just think that obviously Robinson is more of the traditional running back. He does have some versatility to his game. He's going to be an every down player, but I just like Gibbs from a standpoint as I think he still has yet to scratch the surface of what he's able to do. But when you imagine putting him in one of these high octane offenses and what he can do to really accentuate it and add a new dimension to it, it's really exciting. And I think he has a lot of tools that he hasn't even gotten the chance to really refine yet, which is really exciting when you think about it. He started out at Georgia Tech, then he went over to Alabama for that 1 year, where you can even see some of the special traits that he had at Alabama in just a limited sample size. I think he has a lot more to offer.
All right, let's back to the piece you wrote over at InsideTheBirds.com, because you wrote about the most intriguing being a running back, which kind of brought us onto a running back conversation. Who's got the best value that the Eagles brought in?
I wrote Terrell Edmonds. And it's not often you find a player, Mike, that has 75 starts under his belt at 26 years old, extremely durable. So you wonder, okay, well, he doesn't have an injury past, so why was he available late in the second wave of free agency? Well, the answer to that is he's largely a one-dimensional player in a league that really prioritizes and is trending in the direction of having multifaceted defenders that can do a number of things to sort of short circuit or circumvent rather some of these high octane offenses, and they can be sort of Swiss Army knives on the back end. Now, that's not necessarily what Edmonds can do. He's a downhill enforcer. He's improved largely as a tackler, which was one of his early blemishes when he was a young player. I thought he missed a lot of tackles, took poor angles. But, he can cover a little bit, but he's somebody that teams are going to look to exploit in space and look to target down the field. I just think he's a really tough, savvy leader, and he's played a lot of football, so you like the experience there. And he's played in high-leverage situations, so you like what you have there. And it's really good value considering, like I said, where you found him late in the free agency at 26 years old with the amount of snaps that he has under his belt. And, by the way, he can provide special teams upside. He's played over 500 snaps in his career on the third phase. So I think that's a really savvy addition for the Eagles. Now, you still need to add at that position. And I still don't view safety to be the weakest position on defense. I think linebacker is the weakest position on the team.
All right, and then let's go to your favorite fit. They brought in a bunch of different new names. Who fits the best with what they have now?
Contavious Street for me. I mean, when you look at what the Eagles need, they needed some depth behind Fletcher Cox, Jordan Davis, Milton Williams, largely unproven players aside from Fletcher Cox. And Contavious Street, it wasn't until 2021 he came into the league in 2018, but he suffered a rash of injuries, tore his ACL in a private workout for the New York Giants coming into the draft. But he was a highly touted player that never really came into his own until 2021 with the 49ers. Last season, he played a career high in snap share, which was 46% with the Saints, was productive, was disruptive. He had 3.5 sacks. And I thought that he was showing shades of the player that many envisioned when he was coming out in college at NC State. But the Eagles need, in theory, somebody that can push the pocket. And I don't view Street as a pass rushing defensive tackle in the traditional sense, but he is somebody that can push the pocket and open things up for other pass rushers. And I think he's stronger at the point of attack, than his slighter build. He's 6'2", 287 would suggest. So it's at best we're talking about a fourth defensive tackle. But I think, again, another guy that's getting very little guaranteed money. He's young and he has a lot of potential. And you would think that based off of what you saw last season, he's maybe turned the corner from his injuries. And I mean, again, if that parlays into a strong season for him, I think that's great value by the Eagles.
Good stuff from Andrew DiCecco. Check him out over at InsideTheBirds.com at Andrew DiCecco on Twitter. And, of course, we are 2 weeks away from the NFL draft. And, of course, you can listen to the draft right here on 97.3 ESPN. Thursday, April 27th, the coverage begins at 7 o'clock. Andrew, we'll talk to you, pal.
Have a good one, Mike.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, everybody, here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.